Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Energy MD podcast, where we are on a mission to help 1 million people resolve their fatigue so that they can have more fun and success in every aspect of their lives. And as you guys know, we're looking at over 30 different causes, and some really important causes are hormones. So we're going to be talking with my good friend, Kyrin, today, Dr. Kyrin, and we're going to be talking about hormones. So let's learn a little bit about her. So after discovering the hidden cause of midlife weight gain and fatigue in women, OB-GYN Dr. Kyrin Dunston lost a life-changing 100 pounds, wow, and fixed her adrenal fatigue. She is fellowship trained in anti-aging, metabolic, and functional medicine and has practiced this exclusively for over a decade. A pioneer of female hormone justice, Dr. Kyrin hosts the Hormone Prescription podcast with new episodes weekly. She's the founder of Her Hormone Club, an end-to-end, all-inclusive membership providing women access to state-of-the-art natural hormone therapy treatment throughout the US, and the Midlife Metabolism Institute, providing educational and coaching programs for women at midlife to fix their hormones, their metabolism, and their health. Dr. Kyrin has been featured on TEDx, CBS, NBC, Reader's Digest, the Huffington Post, First for Woman, Best Self, and more. She's your midlife metabolic ninja, I love that, who will show you the steps to take to unleash your best health yet. Dr. Kyrin, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for inviting me. Super excited to be here.
So we're going to be talking about the hormone prescription for fixing fatigue. So let's just dive in here. So how do hormones relate to this picture of energy and fatigue?
Great question. So what most women don't realize is that your hormones are communicators in your body. They're actually part of your nervous system, right? We all know that our brain is our mainframe computer that controls everything that happens in our body. And we've got the hardwired part of our brain that's actual nerves that go from one place to another, like from your brain to your fingers so you can snap your fingers. And then we have the wireless connections from our brain, and that's actually our hormones. So if this is our mainframe computer controlling everything, and our nerves are controlling a lot of motor neurons and they're bringing a lot of sensation in, what's controlling the physiologic function of our bodies or the metabolism is our hormones. These hormones are secreted in your brain and tells different specialized organs to make these hormones. So think about it kind of like the internet in your house, right? When it comes into your house, you can plug your computer in and get a hardwired connection that's pretty sturdy, very rarely goes out. Or you can use the wireless internet. I don't know about you, but where I am, the wireless internet always has problems, right? Maybe the signal isn't coming to the router properly. Maybe there's a problem with the router putting out the signal. Maybe the computer can't get it. You know, there are a million problems that can go wrong. And it's the same in your body, that wireless system of communication, the hormones. There are a lot of things that can interfere with them. And that's what tells your cells how to function and regulate your metabolism. So what a lot of people don't realize, what's very common for women over 40, is they have weight problems and they have energy problems. And the two are directly connected. Why? Because excess weight is excess fat, and fat is your storage fuel source to run your body. And if you can't turn that fat into energy, and the currency of energy is ATP, right? So dollar bills, that runs your financial economy, and ATP runs your body economy. So if you can't convert fat into ATP, then you're going to be tired because you don't have enough ATP, and you're going to be overweight because you have too much fat. Well, what connects those and tells your body to run that metabolism, it's metabolism that connects these. I consider it like a bow tie. So in the middle is your metabolism, and on one side is fat, and on the other is the ATP. If the hormones aren't communicating to your metabolic organs to run properly, that's where you get the fatigue and the weight gain. And so that's how hormones create fatigue, particularly at midlife in women and men as well.
So which hormones are we talking about here? Can you kind of are all the hormones? Are we talking about sex hormones, Kind of take us through that, and then which ones specifically are like more important when it comes to energy?
Right, great question. So there are hundreds of hormones in the body that all have varied functions. When we're talking about energy and fatigue and weight, we're particularly talking about the 7 main metabolic hormones that include the 3 sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. And most women know that they have a problem starting at 40 and beyond with sex hormones because we're programmed that way. But what they don't realize is that we've got these other hormones that determine our metabolism that we may not be aware that we have a problem with. That was the case for me in my 40s when I weighed 243 pounds. And those would be insulin, cortisol, DHEA, and thyroid hormone. So I always say there are 2 prescriptions you need to fix your fatigue and weight problems as you age. One is a written prescription for the hormonal poverty that occurs by programming, right? Our ovaries start going down in function and then cease completely. So to restore the hormones to prosperity, you need a written prescription, but you also need another prescription. And that prescription is diet, lifestyle, supplements, all the other things that go into program these other metabolic hormones.
And is there an order that you like to go through with these different hormones in order to fix the whole picture? I mean, how do you, I guess, is there a step-by-step process that you kind of take people through to fix their hormones?
Absolutely. So 2 prescriptions, one's written, one's not. So you definitely need to get the proper testing to see if you're in the hormonal poverty of perimenopause and menopause. I like the Dutch test. I think it's the best. And then if you need some type of remediation there, like a prescription, then you need to get that. But at the same time, you need to be addressing the other 4 metabolic hormones. And you need to have the proper test for that, right? We can talk about that if you want. And then you need to address the problems that you find there. I think that insulin has to come first. You know, we hear that you are what you eat so often. I think that when we hear that, it goes in one ear and out the other. There's so much conflicting dietary advice online, and people aren't necessarily getting the useful, should we say, information that they need from their doctors because we're not trained in nutritional science. So people are out there on Dr. Google reading books and blogs and listening to podcasts trying to figure it out. And it's a very polarized topic online. So people are confused. And so I start with what you're eating, because literally when you look in the mirror, you see your face. But really, I saw this picture one day that really drove this home for me about you are what you eat. It was a picture of a person, and instead of having a shoulder, they had broccoli. And instead of having an elbow, there were tomatoes here. And instead of having bacon, a forehead, they had bacon. And so it was a person made out of food. And so they called it the food body. So now when I look in the mirror, I don't necessarily see my facial features. I see food. So our food becomes our structure and our physiology and our metabolism, but it also directly programs our hormones through our insulin. There's really no greater interface that we have with the external environment than the food that we eat. Most people think, if you ask them, oh, what's your greatest interaction with the external environment? You think it's your senses, right? The things I see, the things I hear, or your skin, right? And it's not. It's your gastrointestinal tract, right? If you take it and lay it out, the surface area is as big as 2 doubles tennis courts. So you're taking the external environment and you're putting it inside of you. That's your biggest interaction. And most of us do that at least 3 times a day. So that is directly programming your hormones. And even though I talk about sex hormones in one category and the other 4 hormones in another, they're all connected, right? I used to have this mobile that was above my desk when I had a brick and mortar office. And I loved to use it to demonstrate the function of hormones to people, because if you pushed one piece, right, what you eat affects your insulin. the whole mobile moved and all the other pieces moved, and there were 7 pieces.
Mhm.
So I used it to demonstrate this interaction. And so the biggest impact you can have on your hormones is definitely with what you eat. And so I always start there.
Excellent. And so that's going to affect the insulin. And
Mhm.
then what does that domino effect look like in terms of how does insulin affect the other hormones?
Right. So it comes in with insulin, which is your main regulator of your blood glucose or sugar, and sugar is your main fuel source. Fat is your secondary storage source. And so if your insulin is wonky, and a lot of people think, oh, I don't have diabetes. I don't have diabetes in my family. My doctor says my labs are quote unquote normal. I'm fine. That's not me. You're not talking to me. What I want to say is, yes, I am talking to you. It's a rare person in America anyway, in this day and age, who doesn't have some degree of insulin dysfunction, even though their doctor told them their labs are normal and they don't have diabetes or prediabetes, particularly women over 40 and 50, because that state of perimenopause and menopause can cause what we call insulin resistance. So you have to have the right tests and read them the right way. So insulin comes in to regulate our blood sugar. Most of us have some degree of wonkiness with that, whether we're aware of it or not. And then it's directly going to affect our stress hormone, cortisol. A lot of people have heard of cortisol, the stress hormone, but we mostly hear about it in reference to life stress, right? Pretty much everyone knows in this day and age, oh, I have a stressful life, jobs, relationships, money, time, all these things. And that's affecting my cortisol. And oh, I should meditate, right? And I should learn how to say no and do all these things. But the issue is it's so much more than that. And particularly it's about your insulin. So if you've got a wonky insulin, cortisol is kind of the balancer on the bottom end of that blood sugar and that insulin. So your blood sugar being wonky is affecting your insulin, and then that's in turn affecting your cortisol. And this is where what a lot of people miss about stress in the body. What you consider stress is not necessarily what your body considers stress. Your body considers a whole lot of things stressful. And all you're thinking is, I can't stand my boss, right? And I need a vacation. And that's the only stress you think is stress. And meanwhile, your body is over here juggling lots and lots of balls. And one of it is what you're putting in your mouth 3 times a day. That's very stressful. So insulin goes into cortisol, and you've got to look at what are all the things. First, you've got to have the right test and read it the right way for cortisol. And then because when I weighed 243 pounds, I had the mainstream cortisol test and it said I was fine. And when I had the right test, I so wasn't fine. I had a flatline cortisol. So I had enough cortisol to survive, but I didn't have enough to thrive. And the difference is everything. It's the difference between you living the best health of your life and the most fulfilled life that you deserve to live, and just existing. So you've got to address all the problems that are affecting your cortisol. Could be biologic, chemical, and all kinds of different stressors for your cortisol. And then we've always got to look at thyroid hormone. And I love talking about thyroid hormone because this is actually something that corporate doctors will diagnose. So a lot of people are aware that they have a thyroid problem, but probably with what you do, fixing people's fatigue, Evan, you're aware of this too, that people get so fixated on, my doctor said I have a thyroid problem, I have a hypothyroid diagnosis, I'm on this medication, I need to fix my thyroid. And I did this podcast episode a few months ago on the Hormone Prescription called Why You Will Never Fix Your Thyroid by Trying to Fix Your Thyroid. Because people are so obsessively focused on, I need to fix my thyroid, but what they don't realize is your thyroid doesn't have any interaction with your external environment. So it's very hard to impact your thyroid. But meanwhile, it's in a trio with cortisol and insulin, thyroid, cortisol, and insulin, I call them the three musketeers, right?
Mhm.
So they all hang out together and they go on adventures together and they affect each other just like you and your two best friends affect each other. So if your two best friends are having a problem and they're depressed and stressed out because you got wonky sugar and the cortisol stressed out, what happens? They start pulling on the thyroid. So you have to address these other hormones to address the thyroid. Now, having said that, there are some specific things you can do to help manipulate it. But really, the gold mine for thyroid is fixing cortisol, which comes in a package kind of, which DHEA and insulin.
Okay, great. So let's talk about testing. So what do you like to see, or how do you assess for insulin issues?
Right. So I recommend that everyone have a fasting in the morning. So you can have water, but basically nothing else. Usually best to do within 1 to 2 hours after awakening, blood work. And you want to look at a fasting insulin level, a fasting glucose, and a hemoglobin A1C, which is a measure of how much glucose or sugar has been stuck on your red blood cells over the past 3 months. It's usually used to track diabetic progress, but it's a great indicator of how each one of us is doing with our glycemic control. We can do a hemoglobin A1C. So those are the basic tests I like. Sometimes we'll do a 1 or 2 hour glucose tolerance test and look at those measures, well, the insulin and glucose after a sugar load at 1 and 2 hours. But usually it's not necessary. Most times with those 3 tests, you can pick up most insulin issues. Yeah, so that's where I would start. For thyroid, there are about 7 or 8 different blood tests that I recommend, and these tests can be done by most regular labs. But it's not the mainstream thyroid profile that has some calculated measures. But you definitely want to look at the TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, the free and total T3, free and total T4, the reverse T3, and then I always look at thyroid peroxidase antibodies and antithyroglobulin antibodies, because like the other day, this happens at least once a month. Someone has no history of thyroid problems. They say their doctor has checked them and their thyroid is quote unquote normal. And she came back with thyroid peroxidase antibodies. If you don't check them, you don't know. But I've had people come back with that in that exact same situation. And then we were able to do some things to get rid of those antibodies. And then they never got a thyroid problem because we precluded that by fixing the reason why people get Hashimoto's and then down the line have low thyroid function. So you definitely want those tests. And then for cortisol, you definitely want a salivary cortisol test, and you want to collect saliva throughout the day. So morning, noon, afternoon, midnight, because your cortisol has a diurnal variation where it's high in the morning and then it comes down lower in the afternoon and goes down for you to sleep. And then usually they'll do a DHEA from that. And then, of course, the sex hormones. And I think the gold standard really right now is the Dutch test that looks at the urinary metabolites to get an idea of what's going on with your 3 types of estrogens, right? Not just estradiol, but your estrone, estradiol, and estriol. That looks at your phase 1 and phase 2 detox in the liver, which is super important. That's not really part of the mainstream evaluation, nor is sex hormone testing in general, I should say. But you know, people worry about if they're going to use estrogen, is this going to cause me a problem? Is this going to increase my risk of breast cancer? And it's not estrogen that causes breast cancer, right? All men and all women and all children on the face of this planet have estrogen. If estrogen caused breast cancer, everyone would have breast cancer. Everybody doesn't. So what is it about certain people that increases their risk? And one of the things is how they detoxify or get rid of the estrogen that their body does have. Because if it goes down certain pathways that you might be genetically disposed to, you might be environmentally predisposed to, then you are at increased risk for things like breast cancer. So you need to look at your detoxification pathways. And then you want to look at your progesterone and also your testosterone, which is super important for men, but a lot of women don't realize it's super important for their optimal functioning as well.
And so in terms of those metabolites, I know that there was
Mhm.
some um, not necessarily controversy, but some conflicting studies, especially on like the 2 to 16 hydroxyestrone ratio. How are you using some of those metabolites to determine whether somebody's at increased risk for a female cancer? Are you using the 2 to 16? Are you looking at the methylation? What do you like?
Right. So phase 2 is the methylation. Phase 1 is the 3 different cytochrome P450 enzymes. So you want to look at the different, how much you're putting down each one of those pathways. And if someone is not putting it down the pathway that increases methylation to dispose of the estrogen and is putting it down the 4-hydroxy pathway where they make quinolones that are more toxic to DNA, then I put them on supplements to improve their detoxification. If they have a methylation problem, we use supplements to improve methylation. So you have to get it out, because in a healthy way, because if not, most people don't realize that not only everything you take in, right, all the liquids that you drink, all the foods that you eat, you break down, extract what you need, and then you have to dispose of the rest. Imagine if you never disposed of the trash, right? You never pooped, you never peed, you would pretty much die in short order. Well, everything your body makes, it also has to detoxify and get rid of, or it can become toxic. So it's the same with these hormones. So you want to make sure that your detoxification pathways are going out. And I don't so much use the ratios, but on the test that I use, it tells you actual percentages that are going of estrogen going down each of those pathways and how much is being methylated or not. So then you can customize your program for each person to increase the excretion.
Okay, thank you. And then coming back to the fasting insulin, glucose, and A1C, what let's get really granular here. What do you like to see in terms of numbers, and what do you consider abnormal?
Right. So I like to see the fasting glucose at 85 or less. Now, the lab is going to say it's normal up to like 99 for some labs. It's going to vary by lab, because what most people need to understand is that the lab determines its normal or reference ranges by what 95% of the population has. So if you think back to high school science, the bell curve, right? So all population measures will fall under the bell curve. Everybody's height, everybody's weight. So the majority of people will be clustered around the highest part of the curve in the middle, and then the tails come down and go out to the side. Well, that middle 95% is what is considered normal for any population, including their fasting blood sugar. So you might be considered normal at 98 fasting blood sugar. But the truth is, you are then being compared to unhealthy people. If you look at the American population, 60% of us are overweight or obese at any given age. And so they're taking those measures of fasting blood glucose for everyone, and then they're saying you're normal for a 60% chance overweight person. And to me, I don't want to be compared to not optimally healthy people. So when we do a root cause approach, we look at optimal values. If you were optimally healthy, what should you be? And the data is pretty clear that you should be 85 or less with your fasting blood sugar. And that even though you may not have a diagnosis of diabetes, every point you are over 85 increases your risk of getting a diabetes diagnosis by 6% in the next 10 years. And we have this fixation with the fact that diseases are genetic. My mother had it, my family had it, it runs in my family, I'm going to have it. When the truth is, the science has proven that there's only a 5 to 10% genetic component in the large majority of diseases. There are some specific ones that are genetically completely 100% determined, but the majority of diseases are not. Diabetes is one of those, and I'm talking about type 2 diabetes here. So you want to get the right test done, and you want it to be the fasting blood glucose less than 85, and you want to look at optimal values. That's an optimal value. Fasting blood sugar less than 85, fasting insulin less than 8, hemoglobin A1C definitely less than 5.0 to 5.2 is optimal, not higher.
Nice. Those are some tight ranges. I need to be looking a little bit differently at some of these, I think. So thank you for that. So the thyroid antibody case that you were talking about, which was really interesting, where you did the antibodies and you found it before somebody had damage to the thyroid potentially and low thyroid hormones. Did they have any low thyroid symptoms?
Well, so the woman the other day has she does have weight gain and fatigue. Those are the only two symptoms. But actually her other thyroid numbers were in the optimal range, even though she had thyroid peroxidase antibodies. So it's at a very low level, her antibodies. So of course, when you see that for the first time, you always repeat it. So that's what's going to happen. But I see this at least once a month. And I have had people who had suboptimal thyroid function, who had thyroid peroxidase antibodies. Their doctor had checked their thyroid by doing a standard thyroid profile and told them their thyroid was fine. And they usually have other symptoms also: constipation, hair loss, dry skin, brittle nails, depression, anxiety. But if you catch it early enough, even people who have a diagnosis of Hashimoto's I've had come to me, and then when they get the proper root cause treatment and they're not just stuck on Synthroid or Cytomel or something like that and basically told, oh, you're going to have this for the rest of your life, which is ridiculous. I've had people go to no antibodies and optimal thyroid function. So it's something that's very remediable.
Excellent. So one of the things that I've seen, and I'm curious if you've seen the same, where people who have poor adrenal function and poor thyroid function, that the thyroid can appear to be better than it actually is because it's compensating for low adrenals. And so I've seen where I fix adrenals, or I'm supporting the adrenals, and then you repeat the thyroid hormone's actually worse. And so it's kind of like, that's where I feel like the subjective experience of the human and the symptoms that they're having becomes even more important because the labs are imperfect. Have you seen anything weird like that when you're working on one hormone and how it affects other hormone levels?
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, insulin, thyroid, cortisol, three musketeers, they do this continual dance. So you have to evaluate. I always say health is a journey, not a destination. You have to be reevaluating these, and you might do something to affect one, and then you have to reevaluate, well, how are the others being affected? And it's just like in your friend group, right? If something affects one, then they bring it to the group. Well, it's going to affect the others, and then you got to check in with the others. So it's a system. And so absolutely. And I think the reason why most people don't ever get their thyroid straight and they don't get off thyroid supplementation is because of this failure to address cortisol. And I'm not sure exactly what you were detailing there, but yes, this dance, this conversation, right? These hormones are communicators. They not only communicate with every cell in your body and every system, but they're talking to each other. And so if you don't ever address the problems that one person in your friend group is having, it's going to continue to affect the whole group. And cortisol is usually the one that's left out in the cold. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question exactly. Yeah. Oh, okay. So you have got to, and addressing your cortisol can sometimes seem like an endless task. And I feel this way too, right? Because I started on this journey over a decade ago for my own health. And when I learned about this type of medicine and this specialized type of testing and treatments, I had been trained in a model of medicine that was all about drugs and surgery to cure the symptom. And when you get rid of the symptom, you claim victory and you're on the path to freedom. And that wasn't my experience. And so when I learned about this, I said, oh my gosh, maybe everything that I learned, I won't say was wrong, but maybe that's just one toolbox, right? And maybe there's this other ginormous toolbox that I didn't learn about. I'm going to explore it and use it on myself as the guinea pig. And if it works, I'm going to spend the rest of my life teaching other people about this. And so what I learned was this root cause resolution approach. And gosh, I got lost in telling my story and now I forget. Could you repeat the question, Evan?
Well, we were we were talking about adrenals and thyroid, and how
Right.
yeah, how the friends are all related and they have
Oh,
to
the frustration. Yes. So I went on this journey. I got everything straightened out. I lost 100 pounds. I cured my irritable bowel, gastritis, hair loss, no libido, depression, anxiety. I had all these health problems. And then I'm like, oh, I'm set for life. And it's like, no, because then I went to work at this place as a consultant in Texas for 3 months. And they had just built out this space with all these toxic petroleum-based chemicals. And I got sick. And so then it was back to detoxifying and fixing my cortisol. And so that's why I say health is a journey, not a destination. And it can seem never ending. And people often want to give up and frustrate, right? This Cadillac or Ferrari of a body machine that we get to live in while we're here on this planet, it's as complicated as a Ferrari. And it requires, right, the Ferrari you see at the racetrack in the Formula One, right? They got to pull it over. And how many guys do they have working on it? And everything, right? Tweaking bolts and checking fuel and water levels and different things. I don't know about cars, but you get the analogy. Right. So I think that we got this idea from our upbringing and our culture that our body is supposed to be plug and play. All you need to do is lay down at night for a few hours, throw some liquid and solid into your mouth that's calories, and you're good to go. If there's a problem, you go to the doctor. They're the expert. They'll give you a drug or do a surgery, get rid of your symptom, and you're golden. And that's so not true. And so we're not used to spending the time, effort, and attention to care for this precious vehicle that really is what's required. And so part of what I work with people on is helping them to decondition themselves from what they weren't taught and they were taught that's not true about creating health. Because the other way will let you exist in a body for a certain period of time, right? On our tombstone, we'll all get a beginning date and an end date and a dash in between, right? That dash represents time. What gave you that time was your health. And when it runs out, you're done. You get the end date to your dash. So if we don't realize this, guess what? Our end date comes sooner, or our true health span where we're actually healthy and can enjoy our lives and do the things that we want to do is shortened, which is the condition that the majority of us are living in most industrialized countries right now. We have chronic diseases. I think it's 50% of us over 50 are on 5 or more medications. So we're kind of in this existence state. By the time women are 56, 3/4 of us, 3 out of 4, are overweight or obese. And what does being overweight and obese do to your energy level and your ability to function in life? It limits it, right? You don't have energy to go back to school or do that new hobby or participate in your relationships the way you want, right? You fill in the blank about what it's making you miss out on in life. It's usually a lot of things when I talk to people. You know, a lot of us are in denial. We don't want to look at that, but I hate nothing worse than talking to a woman in her 80s who says, wow, nobody told me any of these things. I lived by, mainstream medicine. I didn't know it was available to me. And now they feel like it's too late and they've lost all these years of truly living and being vital and alive. So wake up now, people.
Well said. So, yeah, what you're talking about is basically a daily practice, right? So,
Mhm.
what are these things that people need to do on a daily basis in order to create that habit so that it's not like all you're doing is sleeping and that's enough to kind of get you through this life. So, it would be great if you would kind of share with us some of your favorite practices or some of the practices that you do on a regular basis, whether it's
Mhm.
mindset or sleep or exercise or whatever. What do you find most helpful?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say mindset is the first thing that I have had to change. It's not that this machine is just going to keep going if I throw some calories in there, solids and liquids, and I lay down for as few hours as possible, right? That is going to run you into the ground sooner or later. If you're lucky, it'll run you into the ground sooner because then you're going to know something's wrong and you're going to do something about it. I think the saddest is when it kind of keeps you limping along for years. So it's the whole paradigm shift of my body is just a machine like a car, and it will, if I give it the right calorie fuel and lay down for a few hours, it'll be fine. And it's shifting to no, this is a very intricate living system that needs time, attention, care, and nurturing. And it's actually an honor that I get to spend time on that. You know, our mantra is, I don't have time. I don't have time. I want it to be easy. I want it to be simple. Well, some things in life aren't easy and aren't simple. Like death is
Mhm.
just not easy or simple. And no matter what we do, we can't evade it, and we can't make it simple or easy when someone else dies. So it's the same in our lives, that our bodies are these very complex living energy systems. And so it's approaching every day from the mindset of my number one job is to nurture my home that I live in, which is my physical body, right? Most of us think that our
Mhm.
structure home that we pay a mortgage on is where we live. Well, if that burns down, you've got insurance, you rebuild another house. When this body that you live in burns down, you don't get a replacement, right? Steve Jobs had more money than any human on the planet, and he couldn't add 1 second to his life when he got pancreatic cancer, right? It doesn't matter. When it's done, it's done. So that it's an honor to spend the time, attention, and effort. And then I go about my day in that way. My number one priority is eating well and nurturing myself, hydrating well, right? Drinking good, pure, clean water. Um, Getting enough sleep. I call it the nectar of life, right? So going to bed early enough that I can wake up naturally when my body is done sleeping. That means no alarm clock, right? So that means I have to get myself in bed early enough to allow that to happen. And that's a way that I honor myself. But it also means looking at not putting toxins in my body, because that's going to stress my cortisol, making sure that I eat insulin aligned foods and I don't stress my insulin and stress my cortisol. Getting rid of stress, right, where I can. So there's some things in life we can't get rid of, but some things we can. And it's funny because when I first talk to people about this, the psychosocial stressors, I say, well, what can you get rid of? What can you change so it's not stressful? Or how can you change the way you think and feel about it so it's not stressful? And everyone first answer, and this used to be my answer too, is, oh, I can't get rid of anything in my life. I can't change anything. And that's actually not true. That's just a belief that we hold. So another practice that I do is always questioning the beliefs that I have.
Mm.
Because most of the times it's not things in my life that are actually stressing me. It's what I believe about what's happening that is causing this stress.
Mhm.
And so if I can examine my beliefs, and I love to do this, I find that it's not something that people are used to doing, but I love to do it. And it actually ends up reducing the stress. So I'd say those are the foundations. Of course, and there is physical exercise, resistance, aerobics, stretching, um, working with my energy body. That's another thing that's super important. That, we're not just these physical beings. We are energy beings first, and we have an energy system. I know most people aren't aware of this. They're like, if I didn't hear about it at my doctor's office, it's not a thing. And you're not hearing about it in school, and you're not hearing about it at your doctor's office. You just hear some people you dismiss as woo-woo on the internet talking about it. I know Dr. Evan talks about it. I do too. But gone are the days you'll probably never achieve the health that's possible for you if you don't address your energy system. And your energy system encompasses all the things that aren't tangible about your physical body and your physiology, right? Your physical body is Newtonian physics. I take this drug, it affects this enzyme, it changes the enzyme, and then this symptom changes. But we are much more complex, and science has documented our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, our spirituality, spiritual connection. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about science has validated spirituality. If we don't address these things and get into alignment, it forms the framework for our physical body. Our physical body is just a manifestation of this energy, right? And how the energy is running, clear and free or not, maybe blocked. So we have to learn how to address that. I know that's something you work on with people. It's something I work on with people. So definitely addressing that each day for me is part of my practice.
I love that. It sounds like mind, body, spirit, energy, emotions, all those different bodies. Thank you for sharing
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
So we are just about at the end of our time, but I know that you have a free gift for our audience. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So we talked about that insulin is the place to start. It's programmed with what you eat. And a lot of us are eating things that aren't in our best interest and are hurting our insulin, and we're not aware. We think we're eating healthy things. So I created the Diet Deceptive Dozen. That's the 12 foods that are flying under your radar that you think are healthy, that you're eating, that are hurting your hormones because they're hurting your insulin. And then you'll also get with that, as a bonus, my Lean 15, which is the 15 foods you should add to your diet because they actually will help your insulin and your hormones.
Excellent. And then you've got a Hormone Bliss Challenge coming up, right?
Yes. And so that's the first step, is working on the foods you're eating, you think are healthy that aren't. Get rid of those. Add the foods that are healthy. But then I really take you through the exact steps that I use with my one-to-one clients in a 7-day program where we meet for 30 minutes each day, and I give you exercises and challenges. And it's amazing the change you can see in just 7 days. I mean, I've had women say things like, I feel like the light bulb has come back on in my life, which is so gratifying in just a short period of time. And really to see that you can get impactful results with targeted treatments, right, in a short period of time, and take you through the steps. So I hope you'll join me for that.
Excellent. Yeah, and we'll drop the links below and share it with our community. Very excited and love the work that you're doing. You're such a light in the darkness for a lot of these women who are having these hormonal challenges. So thanks for being on today. So great to see you and talk with you again.
Thank you for having me, Evan. Super fun to be here. And I hope everyone enjoyed it, learned something, and that you definitely will access the resources that we've offered.
I hope you learned something on today's podcast. If you did, please share it with your friends and family and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's really helpful for getting this information out to more people who desperately need it. Sharing all the experts I know and love and the powerful tips I have is one of my absolute favorite things to do. Thanks for being part of my community. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. It is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Thanks for listening and have an amazing day.